Commander Zixthala clutched her primary head with 3 of her 4 arms, while her secondary consciousness tried to process the events from the previous rotation. The bioluminescent patches along her neck flickered erratically, a sure sign of severe neural strain among her species, the Velthari. Her aide, Subcommander Krillnex, hovered nearby with obvious concern. "Commander, your neural patterns are showing dangerous fluctuations. Perhaps you should report to Medical Bay." Krillnex's voice carried the harmonic undertones that indicated genuine worry among their people. Zixthala's 4 eyes focused with difficulty on her subordinate. "Medical Bay? Krillnex, I don't think our medical technology has advanced far enough to treat what I'm experiencing." She paused, her secondary consciousness replaying fragments of memory that seemed too impossible to be real. "Tell me, Sub-Commander, in all your studies of xenobiology, have you ever encountered a species that could consume liquid toxins for recreational purposes?" The younger officer's bioluminescent patches shifted to a confused purple hue. "Toxins, Commander? I'm not sure I understand. Most carbon-based life forms have evolved sophisticated systems to avoid and neutralize harmful substances. Deliberately consuming them would be suicidal?" Zixthala finished. "Yes, that's what I thought too. Until last night." She moved to the viewport of her quarters, staring out at the blue-green planet below. Earth. The name alone now sent shivers through her exoskeleton. The mission had started simply enough. First contact with a newly discovered intelligent species. The humans had seemed primitive compared to the Galactic Confederation's standards, but they showed promise. Their technology was crude but functional. Their society chaotic but somehow stable. The Velthari Diplomatic Corps had protocols for such encounters, refined over millennia of successful integration of dozens of species into galactic civilization. But nothing had prepared them for human hospitality. "Commander," Krillnex ventured carefully, "perhaps you could explain what occurred during the cultural exchange ceremony. Your report mentioned unexpected complications but provided few details." Zixthala's laugh came out as a strangled harmonic that made her aide step backward. "Unexpected complications? Yes, that's one way to describe it." She turned from the viewport, her movement still unsteady. "Krillnex, these humans, they invited us to what they called a party, a social gathering meant to celebrate our first meeting. I thought it would involve ritual foods and ceremonial beverages, perhaps some form of artistic expression. Standard diplomatic procedure." "That sounds reasonable, Commander." "Reasonable," Zixthala repeated. "Do you know what ethanol is, Sub-Commander?" Krillnex accessed his neural databases quickly. A simple organic compound, highly toxic to most known life forms, used primarily as a solvent or fuel additive in industrial applications. "Why do you ask?" "Because humans drink it voluntarily in large quantities, for fun." The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle hum of the ship's life support systems. Krillnex's bioluminescent patches had shifted to a sickly green color. "Commander, surely you're mistaken. No intelligent species would—" "I watched them do it, Krillnex. I watched Ambassador Johnson pour this clear liquid into small containers and consume it without any protective equipment or medical supervision. Then he offered some to me." Zixthala's secondary consciousness was screaming warnings even as she remembered the moment. "He called it vodka and assured me it would help me relax. You didn't actually—" "I did." The words came out as barely a whisper. I thought perhaps my universal translator was malfunctioning, or that there was some cultural nuance I was missing. The humans seemed so casual about it, so confident. I assumed their physiology must have some adaptation I wasn't aware of. Zixthala moved to her desk, pulling up her personal log files. The holographic display showed her vital signs from the previous evening, and Krillnex made a sound of distress as he saw the erratic patterns. "The moment it entered my system, I knew I had made a terrible mistake," she continued. "My primary nervous system began firing randomly. My equilibrium sensors malfunctioned. My vision became distorted. I was certain I was dying. But you're here now, Commander. You survived. Survived, yes, but barely. And here's the truly incomprehensible part, Krillnex. The humans. They were enjoying these effects. They were deliberately inducing a state of neural impairment and finding it pleasurable. Ambassador Johnson kept asking if I was feeling it yet, and seemed disappointed when I told him I was experiencing severe toxic shock." Krillnex was now a pale yellow color, indicating deep confusion among the Velthari. "Commander, Perhaps these humans are not as intelligent as we initially assessed. Self-poisoning behavior typically indicates severe psychological disorders or lack of evolutionary pressure toward self-preservation. That's what I thought too, until I saw them the next morning. Zixthala's voice took on an awed tone. They were functional krillnecks. Diminished certainly, but functional. They spoke of having hangovers as if this was a minor inconvenience rather than evidence of recent near-death experience. Ambassador Johnson even joked about it, saying he needed hair of the dog and proceeded to consume more of the same toxin. More? After experiencing poisoning symptoms? That's when I realized we're not dealing with a species that lacks intelligence, Sub-Commander. We're dealing with a species so incredibly resilient that they've turned surviving poisoning into a recreational activity. Do you understand what that means? Krillnex's color had shifted to deep blue, the Velthari equivalent of fear. Commander, if they can casually survive toxins that would kill most known species, exactly. What else can they survive? What do they consider mild discomfort that would be fatal to us? I spent the rest of the evening observing their behavior while trying to process the toxin in my system. Do you know what I learned? I'm almost afraid to ask, Commander. They discussed something called extreme sports with the same casual attitude they displayed toward the poison consumption. Activities that involve deliberately placing themselves in mortal danger for entertainment. Jumping from aircraft with minimal safety equipment, climbing vertical rock faces without adequate protection, racing ground vehicles at speeds that would be considered reckless for our military craft. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If humans considered activities that would terrify trained Velthari warriors to be casual entertainment, what did that say about their potential as allies? Or enemies? Commander, Krillnek said quietly. What are your recommendations for the diplomatic mission? Zixthala looked back at the planet below, where billions of these impossibly resilient beings continued their daily lives, casually surviving things that would kill her people. I'm not sure we're prepared for this level of contact, Sub-Commander. I'm not sure anyone in the Galactic Confederation is. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation Council had been called within hours of Commander Zixthala's preliminary report. Representatives from 12 different species filled the circular chamber aboard the neutral station orbiting the gas giant. Kepler 442b, the air recycling systems worked overtime to accommodate the various atmospheric requirements, creating subtle currents that carried the mixed sense of a dozen different worlds. Hi, Counselor Morden of the Crystalline Collective called the session to order with a harmonic chime that resonated through his silicon-based structure. We are gathered to discuss the preliminary contact report from the Velthari expedition to the third planet of the Sol system. Commander Zixthala, please present your findings. Zixthala stood, her neural patches now stabilized to a professional blue-white, though Krillnecks noticed they still flickered occasionally. Honored counselors, I must begin with a recommendation that may seem unprecedented. I believe we should classify the human species as a Category 7 civilization. The chamber erupted in surprised harmonics, clicks, and whistles from various species. Category 7 was reserved for civilizations that posed an existential threat to galactic stability. Only 3 species in recorded history had received such a classification, and all had been quarantined or eliminated. Counselor Vexhari of the Aquatic Federation raised one of her tentacles. Commander, the preliminary scans indicated these humans possess only rudimentary faster-than-light capabilities. Their weapons technology appears centuries behind our own. On what basis do you make this extraordinary claim? Because they poison themselves for entertainment, Zixthala replied, causing another wave of shocked silence. And that's only the beginning. She activated the holographic display showing recorded footage from the diplomatic reception. The assembled counselors watched in growing horror as Ambassador Johnson consumed what their scanners clearly identified as a toxic substance, then offered it to others who accepted eagerly. As you can see, Zixthala continued, they are capable of surviving exposure to compounds that would incapacitate or kill most of our species within minutes. But more concerning is their casual attitude toward this survival ability. Counselor Thexreem of the Hive Minds, his insectoid features twitching with agitation, clicked rapidly. Surely this is an aberration. Perhaps a religious ritual or medical treatment? No, Counselor. My research team conducted extensive observation over the following rotations. This behavior, which they call drinking alcohol, is practiced by approximately 60% of their adult population on a regular basis. They have entire industries dedicated to producing thousands of varieties of these toxins. They celebrate with them, conduct business negotiations over them, and use them to cope with psychological stress. The holographic display shifted to show humans engaging in what their databases classified as extreme risk behaviors: rock climbing, skydiving, motor racing, martial arts competitions where physical injury was not just possible but expected. This footage shows what they consider recreational activities, Zixthala explained. Note that they perform these actions without coercion, often paying significant resources for the privilege of risking death or serious injury. Counselor Zurneth of the Peaceful Consortium, whose species had evolved past physical conflict millennia ago, made the sound his people used to express existential dread. Commander, are you suggesting these humans are inherently violent? Not violent, Counselor. Something far more concerning. They are inherently fearless. Or, more accurately, their threshold for fear is so high that activities which would trigger panic responses in our species are considered mild entertainment. Zixthala manipulated the controls, bringing up comparative physiological data. Our medical analysis of human biology reveals several disturbing facts. Their skeletal structure is designed to withstand impact forces that would shatter Velthari exoskeletons. Their muscular system can produce emergency strength increases of up to 300% when threatened. Their nervous system includes redundant pathways that allow them to remain functional, even when experiencing significant trauma. But surely, interrupted Counselor Fendall of the Peaceful Consortium, such a highly militarized physiology must come with corresponding psychological instability. Species that evolve such extreme survival adaptations typically develop severe aggression disorders. That's what makes them truly dangerous, Counselor. They are not unstable. During my interactions with them, they displayed remarkable emotional regulation, sophisticated social cooperation, and advanced problem-solving abilities. They are simultaneously highly intelligent and incredibly resilient. It's an evolutionary combination that should be impossible. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. High Counselor Mordun's crystalline structure darkened, indicating deep contemplation. Commander, you mentioned this was only the beginning. What else did you discover? Zixthala's neural patches flickered more rapidly. They have a concept they call survival training, Counselor. Military personnel and civilians alike voluntarily subject themselves to extreme environmental conditions, food deprivation, and physical stress that would be classified as torture by Confederation standards. They do this to prepare for emergency situations. She pulled up another set of recordings. This footage shows humans practicing what they call wilderness survival. They deliberately place themselves in hostile environments with minimal equipment and attempt to sustain themselves using only natural resources. They consider this educational. Counselor Vexhari's tentacles curled in distress. But why? What possible purpose could such behavior serve? Because their planet is actively trying to kill them, Zixthala replied. And I mean that literally. The display now showed Earth's natural phenomena: hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tornadoes, floods, and drought. Their homeworld is geologically unstable, meteorologically chaotic, and biologically hostile. They share their planet with predators that outweigh them by orders of magnitude, venomous creatures that could kill them with a single bite, and diseases that have shaped their entire evolutionary history. And they not only survived this environment, she continued, they thrived in it. They developed technology, art, literature, and philosophy while constantly adapting to environmental pressures that would have driven most species to extinction or forced them to flee to more hospitable worlds. Counselor Thexram's compound eyes reflected the horror of his realization. Commander, are you telling us that humans consider their homeworld normal? More than normal, Counselor. They consider it beautiful. They write poetry about its dangers. They create art celebrating its hostile weather patterns. They voluntarily expose themselves to its harmful solar radiation for recreational purposes, developing protective adaptations that allow them to survive levels of exposure that would be lethal to most Confederation species. Hi, Counselor Mordens. Light patterns indicated he was consulting with the other, crystalline collective minds. After a long moment he spoke. Commander Zixthala, In your professional opinion, what would happen if this species were to encounter serious external threats? The question hung in the chamber's recycled air like a death sentence. Zixathala looked around at the assembled representatives. These civilized beings from peaceful worlds with stable climates and predictable dangers. Counselor, she said quietly, I believe they would find it refreshing. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been humanity's lead xenobiologist for the first contact mission, but she was beginning to think her degree in biochemistry hadn't prepared her for this particular challenge. She sat across from Commander Zixathala in the human diplomatic vessel's medical bay, watching the alien commander's bioluminescent patches flicker in patterns that their translation software was still struggling to interpret. Commander, Elena said carefully, I want to apologize again for last night. I had no idea that alcohol would affect your species so severely. Ambassador Johnson should have consulted with me before offering you any human consumables. Zixathala's 4 eyes focused on Elena with what appeared to be a mixture of fascination and terror. Dr. Rodriguez, please help me understand something. Your medical databases indicate that ethanol is classified as a toxic substance by human standards as well. Yet you consume it regularly. How is this possible? Elena smiled, not realizing that her expression of friendliness looked disturbingly predatory to the Veltari. Well, it's all about dosage and adaptation. Human liver enzymes have evolved to process moderate amounts of alcohol relatively efficiently. We've been consuming fermented beverages for thousands of years, so we've developed some tolerance. Tolerance? Zixathala repeated. You have developed biological adaptations to survive regular exposure to poison. I wouldn't call it poison exactly, Elena said, then paused as she considered the alien's perspective. Although I suppose technically speaking you're not wrong. We do have a saying, the dose makes the poison. Small amounts of many substances that could be harmful in large quantities can be harmless, or even beneficial in small doses. Zixathala's neural patches shifted to a deep purple color. Dr. Rodriguez, I have been reviewing your medical literature. You have documented cases of humans surviving exposure to radiation levels that would be instantly lethal to most Confederation species. You have individuals who live and work in environments that are below the freezing point of water or above the boiling point of many common solvents. Oh, you mean Arctic researchers and steelworkers? Yes, humans are pretty adaptable. We've learned to create protective equipment and modify our environments to survive in extreme conditions. But that's not what I mean, Zixathala insisted. I'm referring to cases where humans survived direct exposure without protective equipment. Individuals who fell through ice and survived submersion in near-freezing water for extended periods. People who survived exposure to desert temperatures that exceeded safe thermal limits for most known biology. Elena nodded slowly. There have been some remarkable survival stories over the years. The human body has some pretty impressive emergency protocols. When faced with extreme stress, we can shut down non-essential functions, redirect resources, and maintain core operations under conditions that would normally be fatal. Emergency protocols, Zixathala said faintly. Dr. Rodriguez, what you describe as emergency protocols would be considered supernatural abilities by most Confederation species, and you speak of them as if they were normal biological functions. Well, they are normal for us. Every human has these capabilities, though not everyone has had to use them. Elena pulled up a holographic display showing human physiological data. When threatened, humans experience what we call an adrenaline response. Heart rate increases, pain sensitivity decreases, strength and speed increase dramatically, and cognitive processing accelerates. Your entire species can enter an enhanced combat state at will? Not exactly at will, Elena corrected. It's an involuntary response to perceived threats, though some people have learned to trigger it deliberately through training or extreme situations. Zixathala was quiet for a long moment, her bioluminescent patches flickering in complex patterns that Elena's translation software couldn't parse. Finally, she spoke. Dr. Rodriguez, I need to understand something else. Your military personnel undergo what you call boot camp or basic training. This involves subjecting volunteers to physical and psychological stress that would be considered severe abuse by Confederation standards. Why do you do this? Elena had to think about how to explain military training to someone whose species had presumably evolved past the need for such preparation. The training is designed to prepare soldiers for the stress and dangers they might face in combat situations. By exposing them to controlled versions of those stresses, We help them develop the mental and physical resilience they'll need to protect themselves and others. You deliberately traumatize your own people to make them more effective at surviving traumatic situations. That's a very blunt way to put it, but not entirely inaccurate. The training is carefully designed and supervised. We don't want to cause permanent harm, just to push people beyond what they thought were their limits so they can discover their true capabilities. Zixthala's color shifted to something Elena's software couldn't interpret. Dr. Rodriguez, are you aware that the training regimen you just described would kill approximately 40% of Velthari subjects and cause permanent psychological damage to most of the survivors? Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the climate control system. No, I wasn't aware of that. I mean, obviously different species would have different tolerances, but I didn't realize the gap was so extreme. It's not just the Velthari, Zixthala continued. I've been comparing your training protocols with the physiological limits of known Confederation species. What you consider normal preparation for young adults would be classified as enhanced interrogation techniques by most civilized worlds. The silence stretched between them as Elena grappled with this revelation. Commander, are you saying that humans are unusually tough? Dr. Rodriguez, I'm saying that humans are barely recognizable as sentient life to most of the galaxy. You have evolved on a world that would be classified as a death world by Confederation standards. You have developed survival capabilities that border on the impossible, and most disturbingly, you consider all of this normal. Elena looked at the medical data still displayed in the hologram, seeing it now through alien eyes. Heart rates that could double without damage, bone density that could withstand impacts that would shatter most materials, immune systems that could adapt to previously unknown threats within days, psychological resilience that allowed individuals to maintain function under conditions that would drive most sentients insane. Commander, she said slowly, what exactly are the implications of these differences? Zixthala's 4 eyes met Elena's 2 in a gaze that conveyed a depth of concern that transcended species barriers. Dr. Rodriguez, the Galactic Confederation has protocols for integrating new species into our civilization. We have procedures for dealing with aggressive species, primitive species, even dangerous species, but we have never encountered a species that was simultaneously highly intelligent and virtually indestructible. I wouldn't say we're indestructible. Your species has survivors of direct nuclear weapon exposure. Zixthala interrupted. You have documented cases of individuals surviving conditions that our computers classify as incompatible with known biology. You perform medical procedures on yourselves while conscious that most species would require total anesthesia to survive. Elena thought about routine dental work, minor surgery with local anesthesia, and the thousands of other medical procedures humans endured with minimal sedation. Commander, what are you most concerned about? Dr. Rodriguez, I am concerned that the Galactic Confederation is not prepared to coexist with a species whose idea of relaxation involves consuming neurotoxins, whose entertainment includes deliberate exposure to mortal danger, and whose training methods would constitute war crimes on most civilized worlds. The medical bay's quiet hum seemed unnaturally loud as Elena contemplated humanity's place in a galaxy full of more fragile beings. What do you recommend? I honestly don't know, Zixthala admitted. But I'm beginning to understand why your species never developed faster than light travel until very recently. What do you mean? Dr. Rodriguez, most species develop space travel out of necessity, to escape dangerous conditions or resource limitations on their homeworlds. You never needed to leave Earth because nothing in space could possibly be more dangerous than what you evolved to handle at home. Ambassador Johnson had been in worse situations than facing a panel of concerned alien diplomats, though he had to admit this was definitely in his top 10. The Confederation representatives had requested what they called a cultural clarification session, which sounded ominous even through the translation matrix. He sat in the neutral meeting chamber aboard the Velthari vessel, surrounded by beings whose body language he was still learning to read. Ambassador, High Counselor Morden's crystalline structure refracted the chamber's lights as he spoke. We have reviewed the preliminary reports from our respective teams, and we have some concerns about the integration process. Johnson nodded diplomatically. Of course, High Counselor. Cultural exchange is always complex. What specific areas would you like to address? Counselor Vexhari of the Aquatic Federation rippled her tentacles in what Johnson had learned was a gesture of confusion. Ambassador, we are having difficulty understanding human approaches to what you call risk management. Our analysis suggests that humans actively seek out dangerous situations for recreational purposes. Well, Johnson said carefully, humans do enjoy challenges and novel experiences. We have adventure sports, extreme tourism, that sort of thing. It's not unusual for people to want to push their boundaries. Push their boundaries, Counselor Thexrim repeated, his insectoid features clicking in agitation. Ambassador, we have reviewed footage of humans participating in activities that our computers classify as certain death scenarios. Jumping from aircraft at extreme altitudes, navigating watercraft through violent rapids, climbing vertical surfaces without adequate safety equipment. Johnson smiled, trying to project confidence. Those activities have safety protocols and trained professionals overseeing them. The risks are carefully managed. Managed risks, Zixthala interjected, her neural patches flickering with what Johnson was beginning to recognize as distress. Ambassador, I have studied your safety protocols for what you call skydiving. Even with all precautions in place, there remains a statistical probability of death that exceeds the annual mortality rate of entire Velthari colonies. That's a unique way to look at it, Johnson admitted, but the statistical risk is quite small in absolute terms, and the people who participate in these activities are fully informed volunteers. Fully informed volunteers, High Counselor Morden said, his light patterns indicating deep contemplation. Ambassador, please help us understand the concept of voluntary exposure to mortal danger. In Confederation society, such behavior would be considered evidence of severe psychological dysfunction. Johnson felt the weight of representing his entire species in this moment. High Counselor, I think there might be a fundamental difference in how our species perceive danger and challenge. For humans, overcoming obstacles and proving our capabilities is, well, it's part of what makes us human. But why? Counselor Zurnith asked, his peaceful species confusion evident in his harmonious tones. What evolutionary pressure could have created a species that seeks out danger? Johnson paused, realizing he was about to explain humanity's entire evolutionary history to beings who had clearly developed under very different circumstances. Our planet is challenging. We evolved alongside predators that were stronger, faster, and more dangerous than we were. We had to become clever, adaptable, and willing to take calculated risks to survive. Your planet had predators more dangerous than you? Counselor Vexhari's tentacles curled in what Johnson hoped was surprise rather than horror. Oh yes. Large carnivores, venomous creatures, environmental hazards. Early humans had to compete for resources with animals that could kill us easily in direct confrontation. We learned to use tools, work together, and take risks when necessary. Zixthala's four eyes focused on Johnson with uncomfortable intensity. Ambassador, our analysis of Earth's ecosystem suggests that your planet should have been uninhabitable for a species at your technological level. The predator density alone should have prevented the development of civilization. Well, we did have a pretty rough start, Johnson acknowledged, but humans are good at adapting. When we encountered problems, we found ways around them. When we faced dangerous animals, we learned to avoid them, hunt them, or domesticate them. When the environment posed threats, we developed shelter, clothing, and technology to protect ourselves. You domesticated your predators? Counselor Thexrim asked, his compound eyes reflecting what appeared to be horrified fascination. Some of them. Dogs evolved from wolves, which were originally competitors in threats. Horses could kill a human with a single kick, but we turned them into transportation and work partners. We even keep some pretty dangerous animals as companions because we enjoy the challenge and the relationship. The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of life support systems. Johnson began to suspect that he was not helping humanity's case for peaceful integration. Finally, High Counselor Morden spoke. Ambassador, you described these adaptations as if they were normal problem-solving processes. But what you're describing represents a pattern of behavior that most Confederation species would classify as pathologically aggressive risk-taking. I don't think we're particularly aggressive, Johnson said, though he was beginning to doubt his own words. We prefer diplomatic solutions to conflicts when possible. We've managed to achieve relative peace on our own planet despite having multiple competing nations and cultures. Relative peace, Zixthala said quietly. Ambassador, Your species currently maintains military forces that could devastate your entire planet. You have weapons capable of rendering large areas uninhabitable for centuries. You call this peace? Johnson felt like he was trying to explain color to beings who had only ever seen black and white. Well, we call it peace because we're not actively using those weapons against each other. The presence of deterrence helps prevent conflicts from escalating. You maintain peace through the threat of mutual annihilation, Counselor Zerneth said, his harmonious voice carrying overtones of disbelief. It's worked so far, Johnson said defensively, then realized how that sounded to species that had presumably evolved past the need for such measures. Counselor Vexhari's tentacles writhed in complex patterns. Ambassador, please help us understand human social structures. Our preliminary observations suggest that you organize yourselves into competing groups that regularly engage in formalized conflict. You mean sports? Johnson asked, relieved to move to what seemed like safer ground. Yes, competitive athletics are very popular. They provide entertainment and opportunities for individuals to test their skills against others. These sports often involve direct physical confrontation between participants. Zixthaler observed, we have footage of humans deliberately colliding with each other at high velocity for recreational purposes. Football, rugby, hockey, Johnson nodded. Contact sports are popular because they require skill, strategy, and physical conditioning. The competition brings out the best in the athletes. The best, Counselor Thexrim repeated. Ambassador, these activities result in frequent injuries that would require extensive medical intervention for most species. Your athletes consider these injuries an acceptable cost for entertainment. Johnson was beginning to see a pattern in these questions, and he didn't like where it was leading. Counselor, are you suggesting that humans are too dangerous for Confederation membership? High Counselor Morden's light patterns shifted to what Johnson had learned indicated careful consideration. Ambassador, we are trying to understand whether humans can coexist peacefully with species that do not share your remarkable tolerance for danger, conflict, and physical trauma. Of course we can, Johnson said quickly. Humans are very good at adapting our behavior to different social contexts. We can be gentle when the situation requires it, can you? Zixthala asked. Ambassador, your species' definition of gentle might still be traumatizing to most Confederation citizens. The question we face is whether integration is possible without fundamentally changing either human nature or the nature of galactic civilization itself. Johnson looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives, these beings from worlds where danger was managed rather than embraced, where physical conflict was aberrant rather than recreational, where the very survival strategies that had made humanity successful marked them as potentially dangerous neighbors. What exactly are you asking me, High Counselor? We are asking, Ambassador Johnson, whether humanity is ready to live in a galaxy where the other inhabitants might not survive humanity's version of friendship. The emergency session had stretched into its third rotation, and tensions were rising in ways that the Confederation had not experienced in centuries. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before the assembled council, flanked by Ambassador Johnson and Commander Zixathala. The holographic displays around the chamber showed comparative biological data that painted humanity in an increasingly concerning light. Distinguished counselors, Elena began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. I understand your concerns about human integration into galactic society. However, I believe there may be some misunderstandings about human nature that we can address. Counselor, Fendal of the Peaceful Consortium vibrated his crystalline appendages, and what Elena had learned was their species' equivalent of skeptical attention. Dr. Rodriguez, our analysis suggests that human psychology is fundamentally incompatible with civilized society. Your species appears to require conflict and danger for psychological well-being. That's not entirely accurate, Elena replied. While humans do seek challenges, we're also capable of finding satisfaction in peaceful pursuits. We have art, music, literature, scientific research. Many humans live entirely peaceful lives focused on creating rather than competing. Yet even your creative pursuits often involve elements that other species would find disturbing, Zixthala interjected, her neural patches flickering with controlled anxiety. I have reviewed human entertainment media. Your fiction frequently glorifies violence. Your music often celebrates dangerous behavior, and your visual arts commonly depict scenes of conflict or trauma. Elena felt the weight of defending an entire species' cultural output. Art has always reflected the full spectrum of human experience, including our struggles and conflicts. But it also reflects our capacity for beauty, love, hope, and cooperation. The fact that we can create art about difficult topics doesn't mean we prefer violence to peace. High Counselor Morden's crystalline structure darkened as he accessed the collective consciousness of his species. Dr. Rodriguez, we have been analyzing human historical data. Your species has engaged in organized warfare continuously for your entire recorded history. Even now, in your supposedly peaceful modern era, you maintain military forces that consume significant portions of your global resources. That's true, Elena admitted. But consider the context. Humans evolved in a competitive environment where resources were limited and threats were constant. Our capacity for organized defense has actually helped us achieve the relative peace we enjoy today. Relative peace, Counselor Vexhari said, her tentacles curling with what appeared to be distress. Dr. Rodriguez, your current global military expenditures exceed the total economic output of most Confederation member worlds. You call this peaceful resource allocation? Ambassador Johnson stepped forward. Counselors, I think we're missing an important point here. Yes, humans have a martial heritage, but we've also shown remarkable ability to cooperate and create. We've established international laws, built global communication networks, and developed technologies that benefit all of humanity. Our competitive nature drives innovation, not just conflict. Counselor Thexrim's compound eyes focused on Johnson with uncomfortable intensity. Ambassador, your innovations often emerge from military research programs. Your most advanced technologies were developed for warfare and later adapted for civilian use. This suggests that human progress is fundamentally dependent on the threat of violence. Elena realized they were losing ground in the discussion. Counselors, may I suggest a different perspective? Human adaptability and resilience, which you've identified as concerning traits, could actually be valuable assets to the Confederation. We've survived and thrived in conditions that most species find uninhabitable. We've developed technologies and strategies for dealing with hostile environments and unexpected challenges. That's exactly what concerns us, Zixthala said quietly. Dr. Rodriguez, we've been reviewing the data from your various space exploration programs. Humans have sent missions to environments that would instantly kill most known life forms. You've landed vehicles on the surface of worlds with crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres, and extreme radiation. And you describe these missions as routine exploration. Space exploration has always involved significant risks, Elena acknowledged. But we take extensive precautions and use unmanned probes whenever possible. Unmanned probes, yes, Counselor Zurneth said, his harmonious voice carrying notes of amazement. But you also send living humans into space in vehicles that most Confederation engineers would classify as inadequately protected death traps. Your astronauts accept mortality risks that would be considered unacceptable for any other species' space programs. Elena was beginning to understand the depth of the cultural divide they faced. Counselors, I think we may be approaching this from the wrong angle. Rather than focusing on our differences, perhaps we should consider how our complementary strengths could benefit everyone. Complementary strengths, High Counselor Morden repeated. Dr. Rodriguez, please explain how human capabilities could complement existing Confederation strengths. Elena felt a moment of hope as she activated the holographic display. Consider this scenario. The Confederation encounters a hostile environment or unexpected threat. Most member species would need extensive technological support or protective equipment to survive and respond. Humans could serve as a rapid response force, capable of operating in conditions that would incapacitate other species. You're proposing to use humans as expendable shock troops, Counselor Fendall said, his crystalline structure shifting to an alarmed color. Not expendable, Elena corrected quickly. Specialized. Like having a tool that's designed for extreme conditions. You wouldn't use a precision instrument for heavy construction work, and you wouldn't send delicate equipment into hostile environments. Different jobs require different capabilities. Zixthala's 4 eyes met Elena's with an expression that somehow conveyed both understanding and concern. Dr. Rodriguez, are you suggesting that humans would voluntarily accept assignments that other species would consider suicidal? If those assignments were necessary and important, yes. Many humans would consider it an honor to take on challenges that others couldn't handle. Elena paused, realizing how that might sound to beings from more cautious species. We don't seek death, counselors. We seek purpose. If our capabilities can protect others or achieve important goals, many humans would gladly accept the risks. The chamber fell silent as the Confederation representatives processed this information. Elena could see them struggling with concepts that had no parallels in their own evolutionary experience. Finally, Counselor Vexhari spoke. Dr. Rodriguez, are you aware that what you've just described is precisely why we're concerned about human integration? You've essentially confirmed that humans would willingly undertake missions that we would classify as suicide operations, and you present this as a positive contribution to galactic society. Elena felt the crushing weight of realization. To the Confederation, human bravery looked like insanity. Human resilience appeared to be pathological risk-seeking. Human adaptability seemed like dangerous unpredictability. Counselors, she said quietly, what exactly are you proposing we do about this incompatibility? High Counselor Morden's light patterns indicated consultation with the broader collective consciousness. When he spoke again, his words carried the weight of a civilization-spanning decision. Dr. Rodriguez, we are beginning to suspect that the question is not whether humans can adapt to Confederation society, but whether Confederation society can survive contact with humans. And unfortunately, we are not certain it can. The alarm that pierced through the Confederation Council chamber was something none of the assembled representatives had heard in over 2 centuries. It was the emergency signal reserved for Category 1 extinction-level threats, the kind of crisis that could destabilize entire galactic sectors. High Counselor Mordoon's crystalline structure flared with urgent light patterns as emergency data flooded into his collective consciousness. Counselors, he announced, his harmonic voice cutting through the chaos. We have a developing situation in the Kepler 438 system. Long-range sensors are detecting what appears to be a massive gravitational anomaly. Initial analysis suggests possible stellar collapse or artificial manipulation of space-time on an unprecedented scale. Commander, Zixthala's neural patches shifted to emergency orange as she accessed the incoming data streams. High Counselor, the anomaly is expanding. Current projections indicate it could affect inhabited systems within 6 rotations. We have approximately 47 million Confederation citizens in the potential impact zone. Dr. Elena Rodriguez felt her human instincts kick in as she processed the crisis. What kind of evacuation capabilities do you have? How quickly can you move that many people? Counselor Vexhari's tentacles writhed with distress. Dr. Rodriguez, Confederation evacuation protocols are designed for orderly, planned relocations over extended time frames. Our largest transport vessels can carry perhaps 50,000 individuals in optimal conditions. A forced evacuation of 47 million beings would require resources we simply don't possess. What about emergency protocols? Ambassador Johnson asked. Surely you have contingency plans for large-scale disasters. Counselor Thexrim's compound eyes reflected the chamber's emergency lighting as he accessed his species' historical databases. Ambassador, the Confederation has not faced a crisis of this magnitude since its formation. Our member species evolved on stable worlds with predictable environments. We have never developed systems for rapid mass evacuation from existential threats. Elena exchanged glances with Johnson, both humans recognizing the implications immediately. Counselors, she said carefully, humans have extensive experience with emergency response and disaster management. We might be able to help. High Counselor Morden's light patterns indicated surprise mixed with desperate hope. Dr. Rodriguez, what kind of assistance could humanity provide? Our preliminary calculations suggest we would need to transport millions of beings per rotation to avoid catastrophic loss of life. We'd need to see the specific data, Johnson said. But humans have developed rapid deployment systems for emergency situations. Our military and civilian agencies have experience moving large populations under extreme time constraints. Zixthala's 4 eyes focused on the human representatives with new intensity. You have systems designed for mass evacuation under crisis conditions? It's not exactly our specialty, Elena admitted. But we've had to deal with natural disasters, wars, and other emergencies throughout our history. We've learned to move people quickly when their lives depend on it. The holographic display updated with new sensor data, showing the expanding gravitational anomaly in terrifying detail. Counselor Zerneth's harmonious voice carried overtones of panic as he spoke. The expansion rate is accelerating. We now have less than 4 rotations before the first inhabited systems are affected. That's not enough time for traditional evacuation procedures, Counselor Fendall said, his crystalline appendages vibrating with distress. Even if we could commandeer every available vessel in the sector, we lack the organizational infrastructure to coordinate an operation of this scale. Elena felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied crisis situations, the same biological response that had allowed her species to survive countless emergencies throughout their evolutionary history. Counselors, we need to break this down into manageable components. How many ships do you have available? What's their cargo capacity? Where are the safe relocation sites? Dr. Rodriguez, Zixthala said hesitantly, are you suggesting that humans could organize and coordinate this evacuation operation? We're suggesting that we try, Johnson replied firmly. Our species has experience with disaster response under impossible conditions. We know how to make hard decisions quickly and adapt when plans fall apart. High Counselor Morden's collective consciousness was clearly struggling with the implications. Ambassador, you would voluntarily accept responsibility for an operation that could result in the deaths of millions if it fails? We'd accept responsibility for trying to save 47 million lives that will definitely be lost if we don't act, Elena corrected. Yes, there are risks. Yes, it might fail. But from a human perspective, those are acceptable odds when the alternative is guaranteed disaster. The chamber fell silent, except for the continuing emergency alerts. Elena could see the Confederation representatives struggling with concepts that were fundamental to human thinking, but alien to their experience. Accepting terrible risks to prevent even worse outcomes, making decisions with incomplete information under extreme time pressure, volunteering for responsibilities that could result in catastrophic failure. Finally, Counselor Vexhari spoke. Dr. Rodriguez, even if we accept your offer of assistance, how could we implement human emergency protocols with Confederation resources and personnel? Our species are not equipped for the kind of rapid, high-stress operations you're describing. Then we adapt, Johnson said simply. We work with what we have. We prioritize based on what's most important. We accept that we can't save everyone, but we save as many as we can. Accept that we can't save everyone, Counselor Thexrim repeated, his voice carrying the horror of a species that had never faced such brutal calculations. Elena realized she was watching the Confederation confront the kind of impossible choices that had shaped human civilization for millennia. Counselors, I know this is difficult, but in crisis situations, perfect solutions don't exist. You have to choose between bad options and worse options. Zixthala's neural patches were flickering rapidly as she processed streams of incoming data. The first wave of refugees would need to begin evacuation within 18 hours to avoid the expanding gravitational field. Dr. Rodriguez, could human emergency protocols be implemented that quickly? We'd have to, Elena said. When there's no choice, humans find a way. High Counselor Morden's crystalline structure was cycling through rapid light patterns as he consulted with the broader collective consciousness. The decision he faced would set precedent for the entire Confederation's relationship with humanity. Dr. Rodriguez, Ambassador Johnson, he said finally. The Confederation formally requests human assistance in coordinating the Kepler 438 evacuation. We are authorizing unprecedented emergency powers and resource allocation. You will have access to our entire transportation fleet and emergency response infrastructure. Elena felt the weight of 47 million lives settling on her shoulders, along with the realization that humanity's future in the galaxy might depend on their performance in the next few days. We accept, she said simply. But understand, High Counselor Morden continued, if this operation fails, it will likely end any possibility of human integration into Confederation society. The risk you're accepting extends far beyond the immediate crisis. Johnson's smile was grim but determined. High Counselor, we've been dealing with extinction-level stakes our entire evolutionary history. This is just Tuesday for humanity. As the emergency protocols activated and the unprecedented evacuation operation began, none of the assembled representatives could predict that this crisis would become the defining moment that transformed the Confederation from a peaceful alliance of cautious species into something capable of surviving in a hostile galaxy. They were about to learn what humans had known all along. Sometimes civilization requires a little controlled chaos to survive the truly dangerous surprises the universe can deliver. 3 months after the Kepler 438 evacuation, Commander Zixathala stood in the observation deck of the Confederation headquarters station, watching human transport ships ferry the last group of refugees to their new homes. The operation had been completed in 18 days instead of the projected 60, with a casualty rate so low that Confederation statisticians were still trying to understand how it was possible. Dr. Elena Rodriguez joined her at the viewport, looking tired but satisfied. The human doctor had barely slept during the evacuation, coordinating logistics with an energy and focus that had amazed even veteran Confederation administrators. "Still can't believe we pulled it off?" Elena asked, noticing Zixathala's contemplative posture. "Dr. Rodriguez," Zixathala said slowly, "I have been reviewing the operational reports from the evacuation. What your species accomplished should have been impossible by any reasonable calculation." Elena shrugged. A gesture that Zixathala had learned indicated casual dismissal of significant achievements. "It was tight, but we had good people working the problem. The Confederation personnel adapted faster than I expected once they understood what needed to be done." "Adapted," Zixathala repeated. "Dr. Rodriguez, you transformed our entire emergency response philosophy in less than 3 weeks. Personnel who had never made decisions under extreme stress were suddenly coordinating split-second operations, involving millions of lives. People are more capable than they realize when they have to be." Elena replied, "Your people just needed someone to show them it was possible." Zixathala's neural patches flickered with patterns that Elena had learned indicated deep contemplation, mixed with a kind of admiring concern. "Dr. Rodriguez, I have been thinking about our initial concerns regarding human integration. We were worried that humans were too dangerous for Confederation society. And now I believe we were asking the wrong question. The question is not whether humans are too dangerous for the Confederation. The question is whether the Confederation can survive without humans." Elena turned from the viewport to face her alien friend. "What do you mean?" "The gravitational anomaly in Kepler 438 was not a natural phenomenon," Zixathala explained. "Our scientists have determined that it was artificially created by an unknown technology. Something or someone is testing the stability of our systems, probing for weaknesses." Elena felt the familiar chill of recognition. "You think this was deliberate? Someone wanted to see how the Confederation would respond to a crisis?" "That is the most likely explanation. And if that is true, then there are forces in this galaxy that view the Confederation as a potential threat to be evaluated. The kind of forces that would create artificial stellar collapse as a testing mechanism." Elena processed the implications. "So you think whoever did this was measuring your response capabilities?" "Yes. And if they had observed a traditional Confederation emergency response, they would have seen 47 million deaths and a complete breakdown of our organizational structure. Instead, they saw the Confederation successfully relocate an entire stellar region's population in a fraction of the expected time frame. Because of human involvement. Because of human leadership," Zixathala corrected. "Dr. Rodriguez, in the space of 3 weeks, you and Ambassador Johnson transformed the Confederation from a collection of peaceful, cooperation-dependent species into something capable of rapid, decisive action under extreme pressure." Elena looked back at the human ship still working to settle refugees, each vessel pushing operational limits that would have concerned more cautious species. "Zixathala, are you saying the Confederation needed to become more like humans?" "I am saying that the galaxy is apparently more dangerous than any of us realized, and the Confederation's survival may depend on adopting some human approaches to problem-solving." The observation deck's silence was broken by the arrival of Ambassador Johnson and High Counselor Morden. The crystalline being's light patterns indicated a complex mixture of emotions that the translation software struggled to interpret. "Dr. Rodriguez." "Commander Zixathala," Morden said, "we have received the final analysis of the Kepler 438 incident. I wanted to share the findings with you personally." "What did you discover?" Johnson asked. "The gravitational anomaly was indeed artificially created, using technology that exceeds our current understanding of physics. More concerning, our deep space monitoring stations have detected similar but smaller anomalies in 17 other systems over the past rotation," Someone is conducting systematic tests of our response capabilities across multiple sectors. Elena exchanged glances with Johnson, both humans immediately understanding the strategic implications. They're mapping our weaknesses, Johnson said. That appears to be the case, Morden confirmed. Which brings us to an unprecedented decision point for the Confederation. Zixthala's neural patches shifted to attentive blue. What kind of decision, High Counselor? The Confederation Council has voted unanimously to establish a new emergency response division, with permanent authority to coordinate crisis operations across all member worlds. This division will have unprecedented powers and resources, including the ability to override local governmental decisions during crisis situations. That's a significant change in Confederation structure, Elena observed. Yes, and the Council has voted unanimously to place this division under human leadership. The silence that followed was profound. Elena felt the weight of the moment, understanding that they were discussing a fundamental shift in how galactic civilization would operate. High Counselor, Johnson said carefully, are you offering humans a leadership role in Confederation emergency operations? We are offering humans something far more significant than that, Ambassador. We are asking humanity to become the Confederation's rapid response specialists, our crisis resolution experts, our emergency leaders when traditional approaches are insufficient. Zixthala's 4 eyes focused on the human representatives. High Counselor, are we acknowledging that the Confederation needs human capabilities to survive potential threats? We are acknowledging that the galaxy contains dangers we did not expect, and that human approaches to crisis management have proven more effective than our traditional methods. The question is whether humanity is willing to accept this responsibility. Elena looked out at the stars, thinking about the unknown forces that were testing galactic civilization, the millions of beings who would depend on human decisions in future crises, and the remarkable journey that had brought her species from a single dangerous world to a leadership role in galactic society. High Counselor, she said finally, humans have always stepped up when people needed help, regardless of the risks involved. If the Confederation needs us, we'll be there. Johnson nodded agreement. We accept the responsibility. Morden's light patterns shifted to what Elena had learned indicated deep satisfaction mixed with residual concern. Then welcome to your new role as the Confederation's emergency response leaders. I suspect you will find the position challenging. Elena smiled, the expression that had once seemed predatory to alien eyes now looking reassuringly confident. High Counselor, you've seen what humans can do when we're just visiting and trying to be polite. Wait until you see what we can accomplish when we're actually in charge of fixing problems. As the human transport ships continued their work in the distance, none of them could predict that this moment would be remembered as the beginning of humanity's transformation of galactic civilization from a peaceful alliance into something capable of surviving in a universe that was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. But for now, Zixthala reflected with something that might have been relief. The Confederation finally had leaders who considered impossible odds to be an interesting challenge, rather than an insurmountable obstacle. And in a galaxy that was apparently full of unknown threats, that might make all the difference between survival and extinction, the humans were no longer visitors seeking integration. They had become the Confederation's insurance policy against a hostile universe, and somehow that felt exactly right.